Tov. Hi, this is the last shiur in a series of shiurim, in which I have to say every shiur there were fewer people, which I guess means something. I'll have to think about it. Anyway, what I'd like to mention is something about the Beit HaMikdash. You know, these last five parshiot, the last five parshiot of Shmot, Truma, Tetzaveh, Kitisa, Yakov Pekudei, the last five parshiot, are generally speaking about building the Mishkan. In the midst of these five parshiot is also the Chet HaEgel. And that, in some kind of general way, seems to indicate that when there's a good thing, we know how to mess it up. And that's what happened to us, right? We built the Mishkan, but we also built the golden calf. And eventually, we just could not live with the Mishkan. I mean, the Mishkan became the Beit HaMikdash, and the Beit HaMikdash, the history of the Beit HaMikdash is a history of destruction. The first temple was destroyed, the second temple was destroyed, and kind of reflection on the Egel HaZahav. We were able to build it, but we weren't able to maintain it. We weren't able to keep it. And that's an interesting thing, because the Beit HaMikdash was very important. I use the word kind of guardedly, but the Beit HaMikdash was important religiously. It wasn't just a place. It wasn't just a building. It was the place that guaranteed us recovery. Every day, the Korban Tamid, every day the Korban Tamid offered us salvation nationally. It wasn't just that we gave the Korban because that's what was written down in a book of instructions. But the Korban was meaningful to us. There was something that we went through, a change every day, every morning, every afternoon, every Yom Kippur, every Rosh Hashanah. It was all happening over and over again. It was keeping us who we were. And suddenly it was gone. The Churban Beit HaMikdash, Bayit Rishon, Bayit Sheni, it was gone. So I understand if you say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu somehow sits up in heaven and says, you had enough, you don't deserve anymore. This is not something that can continue. We can't go on this way, okay. But what do we do about what we are missing? I mean, okay, we don't have the Beit HaMikdash, but we can't really live without the Beit HaMikdash. The first person who noticed this, that the Beit HaMikdash is kind of the way we define ourselves. That's who we are. That's what we are. We are the people with the Beit HaMikdash. And what goes on in the Beit HaMikdash is a kind of ongoing cleansing, a reappraisal, a redoing. It happens all the time, every day, and suddenly it was gone. Okay, Bayit Rishon was gone for 50 years. By 70 years, there was already a Mizbeach. Right? And this was sort of a warning. It was a warning because the second temple, as you know, was not quite what the first temple was. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avot lists all of the miracles that took place in temple number 1 that didn't take place in temple number 2. And why is that important to us? I mean, what difference does it make, really, if there was a miracle, if the fire came down from heaven or the fire was lit by a match? I mean, what difference does it make? Because the point is that they never quite built the Beit HaMikdash again. They built it once. Shlomo HaMelech built it. And believe it or not, it was the cause of consternation, of difficulty of dispute, of unhappiness. The taxes on the people were so high that it broke them. They got a Beit HaMikdash, yes, but they were broken financially, and that led to the splitting of the northern and southern kingdoms in Eretz Israel. So at first they had the Beit HaMikdash, but they suffered for it. They paid a very dear price, and they were never able to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash, even though we say Bayit Rishon, Bayit Sheni, like as though it was, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same in as far as the Beit HaMikdash is supposed to give us easy access. You know, you go someplace and you could kind of talk to God freely. You know that God is listening. Imagine a place like that. You know, people run around and look for that place here in Eretz Yisrael all the time. In fact, they look so hard, they sometimes end up in Uman. That's how hard they look in Eretz Yisrael. They look hard for that place because they have it in their tradition. There is a place. There's a place where you just go there, knock on the door, and God is there waiting and listening and appreciating. It's absolutely a remarkable and wondrous idea, but you have to remember that Bayit Sheni, the second temple, was not at all like the first temple. And since the destruction of the second temple, as we pointed out, the destruction of the second temple, there's no way of knowing when this will come to an end. And in some respects, even in Eretz Yisrael, and even the miracles of Eretz Yisrael in our time today, and it is a miraculous thing, it's a different discussion. But you could write me down on the list of people who think that we're living a miracle. Even Eretz Yisrael, we don't have that. We don't have that Beit HaMikdash. We make believe, yes. And it's important, I think, to make believe. It's not a bad thing at all. But when we sit down after we make believe, we reflect on what we've done, we understand that we don't really have it. We don't really have it. And you know that Rebbe Nachman of Breslav, he suffered because he couldn't understand. He said, what did the Jews in the Ukraine, if you've ever been to the Ukraine, you know that the only good thing you could do when you're in the Ukraine is to leave. There's absolutely nothing attractive. It's poor, desolate, unpleasant, unsuccessful. Unsuccessful. For the Jews, it was all of those things and more. And Rebbe Nachman of Breslav said, why doesn't this come to an end? Why doesn't it come to an end? Why is it that we can't get to Eretz Yisrael? And so you know what Rebbe Nachman did? He picked himself up. I think we mentioned it in a previous year. Rebbe Nachman picked himself up and he went to Eretz Yisrael. He just went. And then he looked around. He went to Tveria. In those days, Hasidim were in Tveria. The anti-Hasidim, they're called Misnagdim. They were in Yerushalayim. Now, I suppose there was a Misnagid lived in Tveria and one Chassid who lived in Yerushalayim. But generally, if we're not being too careful in our definitions, you know, the Hasidim were in Tveria. So Rebbe Nachman, he got to Tveria. And there were great Hasidic leaders in Tveria. You would think that Rebbe Nachman would say, oh, this is it. I'm here in Eretz Yisrael. There's a future. We can have... But he turned around and he left. He went back to where he came from. And it's just kind of a mystery. Why did Rebbe Nachman leave Eretz Yisrael and go back to the Ukraine? A terrible place. So I don't know the answer to that question, but I want to speculate, if I may. And even if my speculation is a little off, it's a good idea. So I'll speculate. Rav Nachman said, I'm going to Eretz Yisrael. I'm the leader. I'm the Rebbe. I'm in charge. I mean, it's reasonable for me to expect that people are going to follow me. He came to Eretz Yisrael, he came to Tzfat, and then he went to Tveria, and he kept looking around. There was nobody there. Nobody came with him. And he looked around, he said, I guess it's the wrong time. I must be messed up here. And he turned around and went back to the Ukraine. He said, I better talk to the people. Better teach them something. And you know that Rebbe Nachman was a very special person, and we don't deal so well with special people. You don't deal so well with special people. What saved us, in the case of Rebbe Nachman, but Rebbe Nachman had a Talmid whose name was Rav Nosson. And Rav Nosson wrote up the things that Rav Nachman said. Now, this is not exactly correct, at least not according to the modern scholarship. Rav Nachman wrote some things himself, and then he edited himself. But Rav Nosson was a very exceptional Jew. And because he had the capacity, had this memory, you know, there are people who have that kind of memory, that they remember everything that you say in the order that you said it. And it's nice to have somebody like that around. It's handy. It's handy. You know, like the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he spoke a lot on Shabbat and Yom Tov. When you couldn't record it, you couldn't write it down. So he had a few people, one very famous, like a recorder, a human recording machine. So after Shabbos, after Yom Tov, he would just write down word for word what the Rebbe said, and they would publish it as he wrote it. They called it Hanachot. I don't know why. Hanachot. And then they edited it and put in footnotes and published the same thing in 17 different ways. But the first publication was the publication of Rav Aaron Kahn, who was the human recording machine. He was the human recording machine. So Rav Nosson had a human recording machine. Well, I'll tell you the story about Rav Nosson. The story about Rav Nosson is that Erev Pesach, I don't remember what year. I'm not good on years. Even though I think you should remember 1492, that's a good year, and 586, that's a good year. 586, destruction of the temple, 1. So Rav Nosson came to his Rebbe. Rav Nosson, remember Rav Nosson? He's the Talmud. He goes to the Rebbe and he says, Rebbe, I don't know if he said that. He says, Rebbe, I want to write a Torah. Just like you write. I want to write my own Torah. So Rav Nachman looked at Rav Nosson and he said, I'll tell you what. It was Erev Pesach, right? He said, go over Kol HaTorah Kula. Now, if you've ever learned Torah, you know there's Torah Shebichtav and Torah Shebal Peh and Kabbalah. He says, go through everything. Go everything we've learned. You learn all. Go through Shas and go through the Shulchan Aruch and go through all the books of Kabbalah that we've learned together, and then come back to me. So Rav Nosson tells the story. He said, that was Erev Pesach. He said, so Erev Shavuos, I went back to the Rebbe. You remember from Pesach to Shavuos? 7 weeks, right? How long does it take us to do Daf Yomi? 7 years. 7 weeks. Rav Nosson went back to Rav Nachman and he said, okay, I did it. You know, I guess Rav Nachman gave a little faher. That's what they call a little oral test, you know, like, you know, tests. In those days, tests were different. Tests were different, you know, that the Gaon, when people came to learn with the Vilna Gaon, he would give them a test to see if they were worthy of learning. So what do you think the test was? We think the test was some complicated Torah about one thing or another. No. And the Gaon knew that. The guy's coming to learn with him. He doesn't know anything. Why should he listen to what he has to say? So he would say to him, we'll take a few Masechta. Tell me every machloket Abaye v'Rava and the Masechta Dafef, the Dafef. That's what he called good preparation for coming to learn with me. So Rav Nosson was able to command. He had a command of Kol HaTorah Kula. And Rav Nosson had something to say about this problem. And he wrote it up in a interesting series of books called Likutei Halachot. Okay. So now, before we get to Rav Nosson, before we get actually to Rabbi Nosson, I want to. Have I lost you? Okay, good. So, who was the first person who noticed that B'nai Yisrael were the people of the Mishkan? That became the new definition of Am Yisrael. So, of course, you know. You may not know it right now, but you know it in your mind someplace. That was Bilam. Bilam, remember Bilam? Bilam was a bad guy in the world. Like we put them into two groups, good guys and bad guys. The bad guy group is very big. The good guy group is a little smaller, but Bilam was without a doubt a bad guy. And he agreed to go with Balak, Balak sent him. Balak was the king who hired Bilam, and he was going to go to curse B'nai Yisrael to make sure that they would be defeated in battle in some way or other. So, if you look at the sheet, there are a few psukim that I think, I'm looking at this book because it's bigger letters. Vayar Bilam ki tov be'enei Hashem levarech et Yisrael, v'lo halach kepam bepam nekrat nechashim, vayeshet et amid. But I've seen, Bilam had a little bit difficulty. He tried to curse B'nai Yisrael. It didn't go exactly. It was not, in any event, that's the background to the story. Vayisa Bilam et einav, pasuk bet. He raised his eyes at einav. Vayar et Yisrael shochen lishvatav, and he saw B'nai Yisrael camped, tribe by tribe by tribe. That's how they camped, right? They camped in a square. There were three tribes on each side. There were three tribes on each side. Yeah, come on, you can sit over here if it's easier. How are you? How are you doing? I'm working hard. So it's Bilam. You see the pasuk. He became a prophet. There's this kind of interesting story where the bad guy has prophecy. So we wonder about that. But that's not our topic right now. The topic is the content of what he said. Vayisa mishalo vayomar, pasuk gimel. You see pasuk gimel? It's on the sheet. Vayisa mishalo vayomar. So the word mashal, the word mashal means like an aphorism. When you're missing the sheet, I'll give you a sheet. I have two. That's because I'm giving the shear, so I could have two. So it says, Vayisa mishalo vayomar. The word mashal, it's like a word with a history. What does it mean in the Torah? What does it mean when the Rambam says it? And what does it mean in modern times? But it says it's something that lends itself to a variety of interpretation. Mashal. Mashal. Ne'um bil'am b'no ba'or, ne'um hagevesh duma'ayin. This is a Bilam. This is how he started off. He said, I'm an important person. I'm a great guy. I'm the only one who could do this. He liked himself. Bilam liked himself. We don't like him, but he liked himself. I guess his mother liked him. It's usually the way it works. Num shomea imre'el. What? Is it a colloquialism that he's with Shetuma Ayin? I don't know. It was a way of recognizing him. Rashi says that. I guess everything has several meanings. That's why we study math. Math, there's only one meaning.
I was a math teacher, but I want to
How did I know? There is no such thing. Words mean all kinds of things at the same time. That's what I mean. It's not like math. In math, you try to get a formula that expresses it perfectly. That's words. Words can't do that. But that's the glory of words. Everything has got its glory. So, okay, Hashem achazeh shadai achazeh nofel glory. Now he compliments himself. That's how he starts out. I'm a great guy. God is interested in me. I'm the only one. This is my name. This is what I look like. Right? It's sort of like, it's like we all know people like that. Not as bad as Bilam, but people who like themselves. So he says, then Pasuk Hey, here is the content of what Bilam has to say. Matovu ohalecha Yaakov, mishkinotecha Yisrael. Matovu ohalecha. Ohalecha means tents. Tovu means how fine, how good, how great. How goodly are your tents? You mentioned that the English translation here, the Art Scroll translation is goodly. You know that word? Doesn't that sound awful? You have goodly tents? That's really terrible. But I guess they think, you don't think if you use these kind of supposedly antiquated words, it's more authentic. Or you'll think that the Torah was written in English. It wasn't. Matovu ohalecha Yaakov. So Bilam is looking at the camp of Israel, and he looks at Ohalim. I guess they were Ohalim. Ohalim is a tent. A tent is a kind of a temporary structure. Temporary structure. You know, Bnei Israel in the desert, they had this temporariness about them. They had to go from place to place as directed by God. Their punishment for the chet Meraglim, for the chet of the spies that they sent to Israel, and then they came back. The spies came back and they said, "No, you should don't go. They said it in their own way. They said, "Don't go." These spies and Bnei Israel were punished because they listened to the spies, and for 38 years they wandered around in the desert, directed by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Directed. So they lived in tents. They lived in tents. So this seems to be an accurate representation. Then there is the second half of the pasuk, Mishkinotecha Yisrael. Mishkinotecha. I don't know what that word means. The place that you dwell. The place that you dwell. But that is the same word as the word Mishkan. The word Mishkan, which was the temple, so to speak, that they built in the desert for themselves at the direction of Moshe Rabbeinu, who heard from God what the Mishkan was supposed to look like. Now, if you look at Rashi, Rashi's on the sheet. If you look at Rashi on the sheet, Matovu ohalecha Yaakov. So Rashi doesn't understand. Rashi doesn't understand what Bilam is saying. I mean, didn't everybody live in a tent in the desert? What's the big deal? And what is tovu ohalecha? Goodness, the goodness of your tents. I mean, what goodness is there in tents? What was it that Bilam saw? So here we have Rashi. Al shara pitchehem. He saw the doors of the tents, right? Every tent has a door. There's a way in and a way out, right? He says, she'ein mechuvanim, she'einan mechuvanim ze mizeh. And he said, it's inconceivable. I mean, he never heard of such a thing. That people were not interested in talking Lashon Hara about each other. They were not interested in looking into the doorways of each other. So Matovu ohalecha Yaakov, according to Rashi, has something to do with their midot, the way they were, the way he saw it. He saw it as a distance. The second part of the pasuk is Mishkinotecha Yisrael. Rashi says Mishkinotecha means Chaniyotecha, the places that you dwell, that you stay. In other words, it doesn't really mean anything. So Rashi is missing a good interpretation of Mishkinotecha. He's missing it. And you know, Rashi doesn't like to miss out. He doesn't like to leave us hanging. He doesn't want to, after all, we know that Bilam's words were directed by heaven. It wasn't Bilam talking. It was God talking. And if it's God talking, it should be godly in its meaning. So Mishkinotecha Yisrael just doesn't cut it for Rashi. It's just not good enough. So Rashi says, Mishkinotecha Davar Acher. That's a story. Sometimes Rashi says Davar Acher, another interpretation. Now we would expect that Rashi would have one interpretation. But give me the best. Give me the best interpretation. You have sometimes Rashi says, I can't do that. The best is more than one. The best is more than one. It's not like math. That's what Rashi says. What?
Math is very beautiful, it's very creative, and there's no one solution.
Where, in math?
There's a solution, but there's many, many ways to get to it.
Yeah, there could be, but there's always one solution. There's one truth, right? Here, there's more than one truth. Davar acher. What is Matobo alecha? He says, Ohel refers to the Mishkan in Shiloh. Shiloh. I mean, if you've never been to Shiloh, I mean, I don't advertise it, but you can go. You can go. So, the Tabernacle, it was when they went from the desert to Eretz Yisrael, it took over 400 years until the Beit HaMikdash was actually built. During those 400 years, the Aron HaKodesh, remember the Aron HaKodesh? The Aron, what's an Aron? A what? What? A closet? Yeah, it could be. That's good. But in this case, the Aron HaKodesh is the ark in which the tablets were kept, right? The ark had a cover to it. You didn't go in through the sides or the front. You went in through the top. You put things in through the top, and it was covered by something called kaporet. For 369 years out of the 430, the Mishkan was in Shiloh. Shiloh is north of Yerushalayim, right? That's where it was. That's where they kept it. Rashi says, Davar Acher, how Matovu Ohel Shiloh, that the tent in Shiloh is tov, is good. And then he says, and the Beit HaMikdash b'Yeshuvah, the Beit HaMikdash at Shiloh, the Beit HaMikdash, that's what Billa was looking at. He said, Matovu Ohalecha. He didn't mean the tents that you're in now, but he's talking about the ultimate tents. Where are the ultimate tents in plural? Shiloh and Yerushalayim. That's Matovu Ohalecha, Matovu Ohalecha. So in other words, according to Rashi, the goodness that Bilam perceived was the world including the Ohel. And the Ohalim, the tents, refer to Shiloh, which was the first place really of the Mishkan, of the Tabernacle in Eretz Yisrael, and Yerushalayim, which was the second place. So that's Bilam. Bilam says, you're a wondrous people. There's something very special about you. What's so special about you? Well, you have Ohalim. And why are the Ohalim special for you? Because they raise you up. They make you special people, and that goes back to the first interpretation in Rashi. The first interpretation in Rashi is the doors of the Ohalim, that the Ohalim that they lived in, were not facing were facing each other, but they were faced away so that there was no possibility of Lashon Hara. So it's like, if you take the two interpretations together, you start with the Davar Acher. So Rashi says, tents, Shiloh, Beit HaMikdash, they change your ethical perceptions. You become different people. And I'm looking at you. I'm looking at the mashal. I'm looking at the derived interpretation. But I'm also looking at you in real time. I see you. And what do I see? I see that you are not interested in avak lashon hara, in the possibility of doing anything that's anything to do with lashon hara. So why are you that way? Why are you the way you are? You are the way you are because there is a Beit HaMikdash in your future. That's who you are already. That's what the Mishkan in the desert was about. It wasn't just an obligation. It wasn't just something that they had to do. It was rather the thing that elevated them, that changed them, that made them special, that indicated to the entire world who they really were. So having introduced the topic in this way, I wondered, what is it? I mean, you know, God punishes Bnei Yisrael for their lapses. I have no ta'anot. I have nothing to say about the punishment that God ordained against Bnei Yisrael. We were exiled, we were downtrodden. We had some good years, yes, but most of them were not so good and not so hard, and we had to work hard and fight hard to maintain ourselves in these years of exile. But it says, why did God take away from us the Beit HaMikdash? Why did God take the only thing that seemed to guarantee that we would be able to function in an ethically superior manner? Why were we sent into exile? Well, we didn't have anything to hold on to. We didn't have anything to, any way of maintaining ourselves. We had to recreate ourselves. Why is that? Why was that? So Rav Nosson, remember Rav Nosson? I told you the story about Rav Nosson, that in 7 weeks he reviewed all of the Torah. He wrote a very interesting book. It's not a book, it's published sometimes as 10 books, 10 volumes, called Likutei Halachot, in which Rav Nosson tries to show you that the halachot of the Shulchan Aruch somehow are enhanced, explained, invested with new meaning through the Torot of Rebbe Nachman. It's a remarkable idea. And here on this page you have a quote from one of those things. Likutei Halachot or Chaim Brovender B'tziyat Hapat, the laws of breaking bread. Breaking bread, you know that's what you do when you eat a piece of bread? You break it off of a loaf. Today, we're spoiled. It's too hard to break things off of the loaf, so we buy sliced bread. But in those days, it was like a big deal. You got a loaf of bread, you know, like nobody would take less. Couldn't imagine in the days of the Tanoim that Mrs. Tanoim would serve sliced bread. It was always a loaf. It was always a loaf. So let's look together. I'll read it. And you read, I mean, the lines are not numbered, so that's good. So I'll tell you what number the line is, and then you'll have to look, and by that time we'll be in a different line. So that's always good. It'll confuse the enemy. Ze Matobo Alecha Yakov Mishka Dotel Yisrael. We know what that is. That's Billa. Right? Rav Nosson quoting Billa. Matobo Alecha Yakov. Tobo Alecha Yakov means pshat, a higher moral standard. Davar acher, Bayit Rishon, Shiloh and Bayit Rishon. He says, Shemedaber b'shevach batei knesiyot u'bnei midrashot. So the Rav Nosson says, there's a davar acher to the davar acher. The davar acher to the davar acher, there's a further interpretation. Like once you open it up, it just goes on. And what's the further interpretation? We're talking about batei knesiyot, synagogues. Batei midrashot, places where people learn Torah. V'zeu kinechalim nitayu, the next pasuk, I don't want to explain that. It'll take us out of our process. Kihem mitaharim, the waters of the nechalim, that's what he's referring to. They purify the person, kimo nachal novea. Right, water is purifying, right? We know about a mikveh. Water purifies if you're thinking the right thoughts, the Rambam says. Rambam says it's not the mikveh that purifies you, it's the mikveh generating the right thinking, the way you're supposed to think. That's what produces tahara. And the fourth line, that's the connection between water and Batei Knesiot and Batei Midrashot. Just like water does it, but Beit Knesset does it, and Beit Midrash does it. Ki heim bechinat nahar she'eino posek. It's like a river that keeps moving along, right? That's the kind of water that you could use for a mikveh. V'chemayan hamitgaber, and like a spring that comes out, the water keeps coming out as long as it's alive. As the water, if the water is alive, it can be used as a mikveh. I'm on the fifth line. This water cleans up the dirty clothes. Even if the dirt keeps accruing, right? That's what we do. We're always trying to clean ourselves, always trying to make ourselves look good and look white. And the Torah, we know, is connected to water. So along comes Rav Nosson. And Rav Nosson says we were not orphaned. We are not orphans after the Churban Beit HaMikdash. Maybe it's not as good. Maybe it does not work to universally solve the problem. Maybe. But we have Batei Knesiot and Batei Midrashot, the Rav Nachman says. And they act as a purifying agent, which he'll continue to explain. Purifying agent means you go to shul, it does something. It does something. I'm not talking about davening. I'm not talking about the mitzvah of tefillah. There's a mitzvah of tefillah. You know very well. You can daven any place, almost any place, as long as it's not a dirty place. It may be better to daven with a minyan. It may be better to daven in a Beit Knesset, but you can do the mitzvah of tefillah any place. You could ask my daughters. They haven't been in shul in 400 years. You can daven any place, but not every place is a Beit Knesset. Not every place is a Beit Midrash. You can learn any place, but not every place is a Beit Midrash. So this idea that there is a place that can be differentiated from other places, which we thought was an idea that actually belonged to the Beit HaMikdash. It belonged to it. That's what the Beit HaMikdash was. It's true. There were endless numbers of halachot, of laws that are fulfilled in a special way in the Beit HaMikdash. All of that is true. But it's also true that God allowed the Beit HaMikdash to be a special place. A place where the presence of God would be available. So along comes Rav Nosson, and I mean it's going to be something that he validates and verifies by other sources, but along comes Rav Nosson and says, we still have it. It may not be exactly the same. It may not be a perfect rendition, but we have the opportunity. The difference is that the Beit HaMikdash was sui generis. It was its own definition. It was the place that God agreed to be. Batei Knesset and Batei Midrashim are different. They're not places that God agreed to be. However, they are places that we have agreed to assemble in. And it's the assembly that seems to bring some blessing to the place, and the idea that HaKadosh Baruch Hu might be there even more than any place else. Now if we look at line, just a second, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9. Shizeu ma'alat ha-Beit Knesset u-Beit Midrash. the advantage of the Beit Knesset and the Beit Midrash. Machamat sheyesh makom kavua leTorah u'tfilah, al yedei zeh kol sof nithar mehem. You know, even though we don't have a temple, we can create a makom kavua. We can create a Beit Knesset. A Beit Knesset is a place which is designated. It's not designated by God, it's designated by us, but somehow that designation is meaningful according to Rav Nosson. According to Rav Nosson. That designation makes a place, creates a place, and that creation of a place is itself what brings you purity. זהו מעלת הבית כנסת ובית מדרש, שמחמת שיש מקום קבוע לתורה ותפילה, על ידי זה סוף כל סוף נטהר בהם. I just read the same lines over again. כי אדם יחידי יכולה להפיל חס ושלום, על ידי התגברותם כנ"ל. אבל כשיש בית מדרש קבוע, כל מישהו בכלל, אנשי הבית ומדרש הקדוש, ואינו מפרד עצמו מהם לגמרי חס ושלום, ודאי יתגבר קידושת הבית ומדרש שכלול בעסק התורה של רבים, שיש להם כוח ביותר להמשיך עליהם הערה משורשי נשמותם הנמשכים על ידי הצדיקי אמת. Again, Rav Nosson says, listen, we all know that we're like deficient. Well, we can't quite do it. We want to do it. We want to do it. We, individually, each one of us, we want to. I mean, of course, it's a great idea. Imagine you go to shul and you feel elated. I mean, that would be great. But we know that that's not always the case. It's not always the case that shul brings us to greater heights. We go to shul and we're kind of unhappy sometimes. So Rav Nosson says the reason that you feel that way. I mean, this is not just Rav Nosson, this is Rav Nachman and other great Hasidic Rebbeim. He says, in order the opportunity to feel that you're greater than you are, that you have more in you than you suspected, that you're able to make contact with God in spite of the fact that you really don't have it, that you don't is because you're able to connect to the people standing in the shul. You're able to connect to what's going on in the shul. It's like there's a bigger voice. There's a bigger voice coming out of you because of the voice in the shul. Because of the voice in the shul. And that's why in Chassidut, there was always this idea, you daven with the Rebbe. You know, davening with the Rebbe. The Rebbe davens and you daven. So why do you be davening with the Rebbe? So you say, well, because I want my tefillah to go up to heaven. I want it to go. So who's going to get it there? Who's going to push it all the way up? So I say, the Rebbe. The Rebbe, he's certainly davening. He's certainly got it under control. He certainly knows what he's doing. So if I could just attach myself, even if I could just attach my tefillah to the Rebbe, then I'm in. Then I've got it. All of a sudden, I've got a method. It's true, it's not the Beit HaMikdash. The Beit HaMikdash, it was given to us. It was there. It was there. It was the place of the Aron HaKodesh. That which was given to Moshe Rabbeinu from Har Sinai, that Aron HaKodesh, that was the place of God's communication to us. It was the place of connection, whether we stood outside of the Old Moed or inside the Old Moed. Moshe Rabbeinu was there, and Moshe Rabbeinu taught us inside, outside. It doesn't matter. I mean, it matters. But it's of no great significance beyond the opportunity to connect. So along comes Rav Nosson. Rav Nosson speaking in the voice which you could find in other Chassiduyot, with other Chassidish Rebbeim. He says, I want to connect to the Rebbe. I want to daven with the Rebbe. What makes my davening, the davening with the Rebbe, that we're in a place that was designated as the place of tefillah, the place of davening. Who designated it as such? Well, the people in it. The people who were there, they made it into a place, of davening, and it's true. You go to Yerushalayim, there's so many shuls, so many places, but in any shul, most of the people who attend are the same people that you saw last week. The same people. And they create this bond. And that bond, according to the language of Hasidut, but it's true, I think, in every language, but in the language of Hasidut, they create this bond which connects them to the Rebbe, which enables the Rebbe to pull them up to heaven, so that the answer to the question is, there is no Beit HaMikdash. There is no Beit HaMikdash. It's not as easy as it used to be. But it could happen. It could happen. Look, I know that everybody has a memory. Everybody has a memory. People learned in yeshiva. They all have a memory of Ne'ilah. Right? They have a memory. And that memory says, I did it. It really happened. And I think everybody has that kind of memory. It could be in a yeshiva. It could be outside of yeshiva going to, I know my daughters like to go to Kever Rachel. It's a memory that's created by an event. And that memory proves to me, that I could daven. I mean, it may be that it also shows me that very often I don't daven. I mean, while I'm moving my lips and turning the pages. But it also tells me I could daven if I had the right community and if I had the right Rebbe. Rebbe doesn't have to be a Hasidic Rebbe. It could be somebody who I trust. Somebody who I trust is davening better than I am davening. And if I could just connect, that would be a wondrous thing. A little more of Rav Nosson. The next paragraph, the bottom of the column, the second paragraph, 4 lines from the bottom. Shetarach David HaMelech alav shalom kol kach limtzo makom l'Hashem. And we know that David HaMelech wanted to build the Beit HaMikdash because he knew that everything would change. Everything would change with building the Beit HaMikdash. And in fact, we know that after the northern kingdom split and floated away from the southern kingdom, right? Shlomo HaMelech built the Beit HaMikdash. His son's name was Rechavam. He became king after Shlomo HaMelech. And in the northern kingdom, the people didn't want to continue their allegiance to the south. They weren't able to pay the taxes. They weren't able to support Rechavam. They broke away, and they established the northern kingdom. And the northern kingdom was led, the king of the northern kingdom was Yeravam ben Nevat, who turned out to be a terrible king, but he was proclaimed king. He was anointed king by a Navi, by a true prophet, whose name was Achiyah HaShiloni. And so, in the north, Yeravam figured out very quickly that as long as the Beit HaMikdash existed, the people from the north would not stop davening in the Beit HaMikdash. And so he had this idea that he would set up a Mikdash in the north. The point is, however, that the pull of the Beit HaMikdash was greater than the political distinctions. The pull of the Beit HaMikdash was national. It belonged to everybody. Everybody insisted on going to the Beit HaMikdash, even after there was a border that separated the north and the south. And that's what Rav Nosson is referring to. David HaMelech kol kach limtzo makom l'Hashem k'mo shekatuv. Nobody argued. The makom of Yerushalayim remained. K'mo shekatuv v'itein sheina le'einai ad emtza makom l'Hashem ki tzarich sheyeh makom kavua l'akdasha shezeu b'chinat gadal ma'amat kedushat habayit. So Rav Nosson says you need a place, right? That that idea was not taken away from Bnei Yisrael. The idea that you need a place in which to communicate with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, except that that case became, as the Pasuk in Yechezkel says, a Mikdash Ma'at. Mikdash Ma'at Anoshim. That there could be such a thing. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu exiled us, destroyed the Beit HaMikdash, and did not clearly state when we would be coming back. However, the Pasuk in Yechezkel said that HaKadosh Baruch Hu left us with this idea that there could be a Mikdash Ma'at, that we could create something that was similar to, if not identical to, similar to what we had in the Beit HaMikdash, which is access, a connection, something to look up to and into, so that Bnei Yisrael, in their diaspora, I mean, Yechezkel was a prophet of the diaspora. In the diaspora, they built the Mikdash Miyat. They said, we got it. We have the idea. We have the idea. The idea is that you need a place. You have to daven in a place. It has to be something that is dedicated to davening or to learning Torah. And with that idea in mind, they were able to persevere in this seemingly endless diaspora. I mean, even though Eretz Israel, as we said at the beginning, is a miraculous event. Today, the modern state of Israel is a miraculous event and even gives us access, not to the Beit HaMikdash, but to something close to the Beit HaMikdash. And that becomes a makom. It's not because, in my mind, it's not because there's a medrash that says, okay, the Shekhinah hovers above the Kotel HaMaravi. It's because people are at the Kotel HaMaravi. It's because that's where they daven. It's not because if you daven there, you're going to get a good deal. No, it's because that's where we decided to daven. It was like a pull that we had. It was something we couldn't give up. We couldn't let it go. We couldn't let it go. And that's the one thing that, I mean, I'm generally very liberal. But I say, you know, if liberal people want to have a piece of the shul in the Beit HaMikdash, they could get it. All they have to do is come every single day for about 150 years, and they'll get it. They don't want to do that, so they haven't got the idea. They haven't got the idea. They think it's a political matter, but it's not. Not a political matter at all. It's the people I want to daven with, the people who think the way you should think about davening. Okay, I'm finished. It was nice seeing you here tonight. Okay. All the best. I'm going to drink a little of this water. I haven't drunk any water in the last 10 weeks. But now I'm not coming back. I'm going to drink the water. I'm not a big fan of water. I'm not a big fan of water. I like Pepsi Max. But if there's no choice, I'll drink a little water. That's good. Not bad. All the best.